Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 2021 Spring Education Program. I am just thrilled that you are here this evening. I'm Ellan Bernstein, a founding board member and former co-president of Impact100 Philadelphia. As I said, I am just thrilled that you are here this evening to learn about Impact's Founders Fellows program and to hear from some of our fellows. Before we begin the program, I would like to give you some Zoom details. Your video can be on or off. You will be muted until the close of the program, but you can place your questions in the chat room and we'll answer them as best we can. Finally, I just want you to know that the program is being recorded to share with others who couldn't attend. So now it's my pleasure to talk with you about the history and the success of Impact100's Founders Fellows program. After the first few years of Impact, the leadership of our organization began to explore ways to expand the diversity of our membership, since we understood that a more diverse membership would bring varied perspectives into our organization and would in turn make Impact a better grant-making organization. We also wanted to encourage young women to learn about the collective giving model and provide them with networking and leadership opportunities. So in 2012, a diversity working group was created, and as a result of that committee's recommendations, steps were taken to encourage more diversity in the age, race, ethnicity, and geographic location of our members. Shortly thereafter, the co-presidents at that time, Sue Dubow and Jackie Stern, in addition to board member Carrie Brodsky, attended a conference sponsored by a national organization called Philanos. At that conference, member organizations shared best practices around collective grant making. Sue, Carrie, and Jackie learned about fellowship programs recently implemented by other women's collective giving organizations and recognizing how well those programs fit Impact's goal of diversity, recommended that Impact100 adopt such a program. I, along with the Diversity Working Committee, was asked by the board to create the structure, process, and funding of the program. In 2014, we started the Founders Fellows program with 5 young women between the ages of 25 and 35. These women were selected through a competitive application process that included a written application and interview. Currently, there are 15 fellows, and over the last 7 years, we have had 29 women participate in the program. The fellows are an impressive, accomplished, and talented group of young women. They are smart, fun, and enthusiastic members and bring a multitude of skills to Impact. Some of those skills include experiences in nonprofit consulting, organizational development, strategic planning, and business skills. As you will hear tonight, the perspectives, energy, and talents these wonderful women bring to our focus area committees, other impact committees, and membership are invaluable. Now, I'm pleased to introduce the moderator of tonight's discussion, Nora Elmarzouky. Nora, please tell us about your background and then introduce the Founders Fellows who are our panelists.
Thank you, Ellen. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nora Elmarzouky, and I'm currently part of the Young Philanthropist, having completed 3 years as a Founders Fellow. I have been an FAC team leader for the past 2 years, this year in arts and culture. A little bit of background about myself. I'm currently working as a climate justice organizer with Power Interfaith in Philadelphia, working on statewide policies, coalitions, and base building around a just transition. I co-founded the Friends, Peace, and Sanctuary Journal, the first Arabic newspaper in Philadelphia in 100 years, and I am part of Insight Collaborative, a collective of 7 other women who, through our various work to address issues of unequal urban development. I'm a cultural organizer working on projects at the intersection of arts, culture, community development, and energy democracy, especially focusing on community engagement, political education, and program design and evaluation. Prior, I worked in democracy activism and designed experiential learning programs in Egypt. Growing up and working between Egypt and the US has offered me insights into a multitude of cultures, recognizing similarities, parallels, differences, which have largely influenced my work. Everyone represents a different amount of time they have been part of the Founders Fellows. Sophia Peake is a first year, Inella Ray is a second year, Nia Daye is a third year. Sophia, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Nora. Hi, everybody. I'm Sophia Peake, and I am currently a first year's Founders Fellow. I joined in a 2020 cohort. And so currently I work as a fund development coordinator for a local social justice organization called the Youth Sentencing and Reentry Project. And I've worked with numerous grassroots campaigns and organizations in the Philadelphia region. And I like to call myself a passionate advocate for equity in the social justice, education, and the public policy sectors. And I'm very happy to have joined this group.
Inella?
Thanks, Nora, and thank you all for joining us tonight and sharing the space with us where you can do something else this evening. So my name is Inella Ray. I've been a part of Impact100 for 2 years now. I'm currently a team leader for the environment. I see some of my team meeting folks on here as well. In terms of my general background, Philadelphia has been very formative for me. So it's influenced both my personal development, but also my professional development. I was always curious as a child of just like, why are things the way that they are? And that really led me to wanting to do economics in school. And initially I thought law, like just being a lawyer was the only way to actually help people in a strategic way. But life has its queer twists and turns. So I went from corporate America to then nonprofit, and now I work at a school. So I would now work for KIPP, New Jersey, where I oversee the operations at a middle school in Camden. And that in many ways has been very challenging, but also very rewarding because I get to be a part of a shared collective that's really creating a safe space for kids each day to come and do school. And that really excites me. So when I'm not at work, I really enjoy being civically involved. I believe you are to be a helper wherever you can. So service is really central to what I do. And when I'm not doing service or work, I'm really reading or traveling just because I'm continuously trying to find out more about the world around me to be honestly a better human being, so I can show up better for people and make the world a little bit better than what it is. Yes, that's me.
Thank you, Inella. Nia?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that, Inella. That was great. My name is Nia Daye. I'm a third year Founders Fellow. I also serve as a team lead and FAC chair this year for Impact as well, and also co-chair of the Founders Fellows Committee. But outside of Impact, in my normal work, I work as a director of Philanthropy. So I work in marketing, fundraising, and development for a local nonprofit called Mercy Neighborhood Ministries, located in North Philly. And we really focus on providing services for the community in Tioga and Germantown area for our kids, seniors, and also adults as well. Outside of that as well, I do additional service. I'm on the local board for the American Cancer Society, also for my local alumni club. And similar to Inella, I love outside of that to travel, also a little bit of a foodie in both eating food, cooking, trying new dishes, things like that. Just kind of exploring different things to just learn more about people, cultures, experiences, things like that. So that's me.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing a little bit about who you are, both professionally and personally. We'll dive right into the questions. So the first question is, who or what first drew you to Impact100 Philadelphia? And I'll call on Inella.
I was really interested in getting involved in philanthropy again. So my first exposure to philanthropy was during college. So I was a part of this organization called Project Haiti. and we would raise funds pretty much for a particular project that the orphanage that we were supporting asked for. And then we would also go down to pretty much the orphanage itself and like experience like the implementation of what we fundraised for. And that particular experience, it was very eye-opening. It really kind of jolted me outside of like my own perspective and made me just understand just like how privileged I was as just an American citizen, and like certain things that like I didn't think that I just didn't have to think about, like things like water or like a hospital being nearby. And because of that experience, I really wanted to get more involved in philanthropy just over the long term. So when I was searching, I found Impact. I just thought they had a very cool model of like trust-based philanthropy, and then having it be a collective decision of who gets what. And since I've joined, I've really been just taken aback at just like how thoughtful everything is, but also just like how intentional we are about like doing the work well. I think it's very easy to like do the work to just simply give money, but I think we try to really like think about how can we do this better, and then we do it. I think that has been something I've most appreciated about Impact. It's just always like learning about how can we grow and how can we get better. And that's what has kept me.
Awesome, thank you. Nia?
Yeah, for me, I've kind of always had a heart and interest in giving and in service. Really, my parents kind of instilled that in me from younger, and we always did volunteer in different ways. And in terms of philanthropy, I think I always thought eventually later in life and later in my career, I would be in a position to be a part of something like a giving circle. I just never thought at this point, early on in my life or career, I would be able to do that. But honestly, it was my job when I started 4 years ago. My executive director, she was familiar and knew Beth Dolly, who's one of the founders of Impact, but she knew her from Compass because our organization was a Compass client. And so she mentioned to me like, oh, there's this great women's organization that we applied to, but they're also having like an annual event. You should go. So I luckily attended. And when I went there, I was just kind of amazed at the fact there was a group of women that came up with this. I've never really heard or seen something like that before personally. And from that, I just started to attend events throughout the year. And then Joanne Levy, she kind of pulled me aside at one of the events. I was thinking about being a young philanthropist. That was when they launched it. And so she mentioned, well, what about the fellowship? You should probably apply to that. So I looked into it, and luckily I did apply and interviewed, and luckily they accepted me into the program. And so it's been a really great experience. So it was just kind of a combination of different people in my life that kind of mentioned Impact to me that brought me to it.
Thank you, Nia. I do want to say Inella and Nia brought so much to the Founders Fellows in terms of just organization and being on top of things and everything they've contributed from my personal experiences. Sophia.
Yes, similar to Nia, I was actually introduced to Impact from a mentor of mine, my previous supervisor. She suggested Impact, and my previous employer was also an applicant of Impact. And so they were aware of the Founders Fellow and just the whole collective giving program, the core grants that they gave. And so I did some research, and I applied and interviewed and was accepted. And for me, one of the biggest benefits I saw to joining was a networking experience. And I won't kind of go into detail, but just to kind of brim the outside of it, you get to meet a bunch of different amazing women who all share the common goal of wanting to uplift the community, who are in various, I would say various actors in different spaces in the philanthropic and nonprofit community. And I just think philanthropy is such an integral piece, to all of the work that a lot of these organizations are doing. And so to be a part of a circle that people are giving collectively to give such large grants to these organizations, it's a lot of power to it. So.
Yeah, for sure. And, one thing that I'm hearing a common thread here is the ways in which mentors and social capital in general have been a way that some of us have been able to connect with this organization and the role that that has. So next question. What has surprised you most about Impact 100 Philadelphia? And we'll start with Sophia this time.
Sorry. What surprised me, I think this was touched on a little earlier, but one of the things that really surprised me about Impact was how meticulous and organized as an organization it is. There's a lot of members and a lot of women who are a part of Impact. And so to have such a really kind of streamlined grant process and a calendar and just you kind of know what to expect. I was surprised by that. And I really I didn't know what to expect coming into Impact as a first year's Founders Fellow, but that kind of really took me by surprise. Another thing that took me by surprise is how involved Founder Fellows are welcome to be. And so when I joined, I was asked like kind of what were the various subcommittees and committees I would like to be a part of or sit on. And again, because Impact is so big, these are also great segues into like being able to network and meet different people, even in a virtual setting. So those were two surprising things to me.
Thanks. Inella?
I'm gonna say it surprised me that Impact operates, in my opinion, not as a startup culture, but it has certain aspects of a startup culture, where it's like if you have an idea, you can take it, you can run with it, and you can execute on it. While that really surprised me, because it usually look like well-established organizations, usually everyone is really tied to the processes and policies that are already present and are not really wanting to change anything. But I think now I'm at a place at Impact, if I have an idea, I'm thinking like, do I actually have the capacity to execute on this? Because I know that people will actually want me to do it or like help support bringing it into fruition. So I think there's just a whole idea of getting better and like getting things right has really been surprising to me. It's just an organization that's always just looking like, how can we get better at doing this work? And that has just been a theme that I've seen. And I think being a part of Impact my first year during the pandemic, I really got to bear witness to that in a different way. I really just watched them switch like the whole way in which we do our grants process to accommodate those who are actually applying for these grants at a time that they still needed the money, but we're trying to also like play critical like sources of support for like the community. And I just thought that like all of the changes that were made like across this past year has just been very awe-inspiring, and that has also just inspired me to also take that sentiment to my own work. Like if I see something that needs to be done better, like do it and lean into it. Yeah, so that has been most surprising to me about Impact, but very much a good surprise.
Nia, anything to add to that?
Yeah, they kind of covered most of it. I would say just kind of echoing the idea that Impact works so well together with it being so many different individuals, different women. We're a membership of over 400 women and at least 200 participate in the grant process. So having so many different viewpoints and voices in a room, yet still being able to maintain that level of like respect and just synergy in this process, I think is something that still sometimes is pretty amazing to me, considering when you look at other decision-making bodies in the world or country, it doesn't always work that well. So I think that it's a really great standard and example that Impact sets in doing that. So
awesome. So next question, how does your lived experience contribute to the process of Impact 100? And can you share a little bit about what that looks like? And we'll start with Nia this time. Actually, Sophia.
Yes, so I think there's actually something to be said about the younger generation when it comes to like the way the world is moving. And as a millennial, our perspectives just kind of differ and vary from the way things were done in the past, particularly in the political and economical spaces. And so the culture and the idea behind what it means to achieve success, for instance, is just different. And I think it also speaks to allowing space for different perspectives to be held and heard, because the landscape of philanthropy is ever changing. And so I feel like as millennials, we're kind of like right in the nick of being in between two worlds. I always kind of like hold this perspective because we grew up in the 90s, there was a set way of doing things, and we're still in the middle of like so much societal change. And so being able to have that kind of running in our rear view is us being able to bring that perspective to the table. Personally, in terms of my lived experience, I work for a social justice organization that works to primarily, they believe that children should not be in adult prisons. And so they work to keep children out of jail. And as far as the state of PA, we are one of the biggest states who sentence children, primarily Black and brown youth, to die in prison. And so I'm also a mother of 2 Black sons. And we all know, namely, with what's going on with just the whole political climate and police violence, there is a very real kind of lived notion or some ideas of just around subjects such as diversity, such as equity, such as social justice. And so tying it back to impact, I just feel like there's a certain level of perspective that I can resonate with to be able to be in between us doing the grant making and a lot of these organizations and the populations and the people that they serve, and to be a voice, honestly, to be able to kind of uplift and challenge some of the biases and ideas that, you know, we may hold, and to say just it's okay to do things a little bit different. So that's been fun.
Thank you. Inella?
I think one of the things that like really stood out to me that came up in the grants process, like as we're going through different like organizations and understanding like their backgrounds, I'm like, a lot of these programs sound familiar, not in a sense that I myself did them, but in a sense that like, I was a part of some of these programs like when I was growing up. Like I remember programs like City or Young Heroes program that was a grant funded program that was like really critical to like exposing me to certain things. So when I like approached the grant process, I approached it from the lens of like seeing myself and how critical those different programs were, but also like how a lot of these programs are not just simply nice to haves in communities, they're like must haves, because like it's trying to mend the gap between where we are and where the government is willing to like meet people at. So it's like this like gap of services that need to be had or need to be provided to that of the community. And I felt like throughout the process that like I could give perspective to people around like how critical these programs were if they weren't able to see it. So for example, things like food distribution, some of you may say, oh, that's nice that people are doing those things, but like in a pandemic, that may have been certain people's only way of getting access to that food. I remember particularly last grant cycle, we were discussing Mighty Writers. We were talking about how whether this organization, what they were doing was as critical as another organization that was providing, I believe, emergency utility assistance. And there was a lot of people saying this felt like more critical work. But for me, I volunteered at Mighty Writers, but I also felt that the work that Mighty Writers was doing, it was trying to provide students really with an opportunity to think creatively and to learn in a space that was free from distraction and have a safe space to go to after school. And I think my experience, not only with Mighty Writers, but also just as somebody who grew up in the city, who understands that education is like a good education is not something that's accessible to everyone in this city, that like programs like that are mending the gap in many ways and are essentially a lifeline. And I think in many ways, like my personal experience and the experiences I see in my direct work, I've been trying to give voice to that in all the spaces that I'm in, so that if people don't know, they get the perspective of what they may not be seeing. And for me, I'm a first generation college student. I'm a Pell Grant recipient. So in many ways, I met the criteria of a lot of these different programs that organizations are using as qualifiers to serve folks. So for me, I think that I bring that perspective, and I hope that I'm leveraging the voices that are not in the room. Because yes, I have an experience, but I am not a monolith, and neither are people who come from the circumstances that I have are either. But I hope that I'm providing voice to things that may not be centered in a conversation or that need to be.
Yeah, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think they both covered everything.
A thread that I'm hearing in what Sophia and Inella have shared is the critical role of people not only working in the social justice sector, but also who've experienced a lot of these programs that we fund, the critical need to have more voices in centers of control and decision-making, particularly around funding, from having firsthand experience on the front lines. Sophia, could you respond to the next question? And again, I know, and Nia, feel free to jump in as well. Now that you've been part of the Founders Fellows program for at least a year, how has your perception of the philanthropic community in Philadelphia and or philanthropy in general changed?
For me, it being a part of Impact for a year and being able to be on a grants process and learn about a lot of the different organizations in Philadelphia and the surrounding city. First of all, it's an eye-opener because Philadelphia is unique in that it has a really robust kind of philanthropic and nonprofit community. And so you're aware that there's a lot of organizations, but to be able to read the grants and learn about them, to me, it highlighted the increased need for Impact's core grants to be able to fund these organizations and the work that they're doing, because so many organizations are in need of funding, specifically these smaller organizations like Inella touched on earlier that don't necessarily kind of meet the traditional criteria. And this kind of segues into the conversation of what does it mean to judge an organization, organization's needs, and how, you know, we evaluate that criteria. But also the pandemic has only exacerbated many of the previous existing social issues that were already there. It exacerbated it. And so being a part of Impact, it's just exciting to know that we're right in the middle of such a huge shift and a huge change. And that's been eye-opening for me.
Thanks, Sophia.
If it's okay, I can add too. Definitely echo what Sophia is saying. And I think too, since joining Impact, I got a better view and perspective and feeling that actually philanthropy can be more accessible than I think it comes off as being. I think Impact has provided a good model to that it doesn't always have to be a complicated relationship between nonprofits and a grantor, or that really leaning towards, like Inella mentioned before, trust-based philanthropy of having conversations, a relationship with a nonprofit, really listening to them about their needs is possible. And again, like Sophia said, I think because of the pandemic, it kind of in a way shifted and forced a lot of funders to do that, and hoping that that really continues moving forward, that funders feel comfortable and know that doing that doesn't mean it's the wrong thing, or it doesn't have to be a complicated situation. That really trusting that the nonprofit knows what they're doing, the nonprofit that's doing the work day in and day out, they have the expertise. You just have to be willing to give them a chance and kind of leave that door open for there to be that relationship and communication between them.
Great, thank you. We sort of touched this question a little bit maybe earlier, but how does participating in Impact affect your work or vice versa? Inella?
So my general day-to-day is really like the non-instructional side of just like running a school. And I mentioned earlier that I'm constantly like humbled on a daily about just like how little I know, or like how I can challenge my own biases and assumptions more. And I think Impact has really helped me further that even further, because particularly this year, we've done a lot of different changes to just like how we approach things like bias, right? Trying to be more intentional about like calling it out when it shows up. And I've been trying to also do that with my work. I think this whole idea of getting to a point of like, exactly, I guess this point of like equity, I'm trying to think of like the words. This is this point where like the equity work stops. I don't think there's ever a point where you can stop learning and growing as it relates to just like equity and trying to like bring society to a more just point. And I think when Impact has furthered my thinking around that, just like how can we like think about this more broadly? How can we serve more needs? How can we be inclusive of bringing more people into the conversation? I've also tried to be that intentional with my own work, because I also realized that like my work in many ways, a lot of people who are making decisions about Black and brown kids are not Black and brown. Like, how am I utilizing like my voice to like pretty much bring up things that may be left out of the conversation? And I think with the intentional work that's happening here, as well as the people who are part of this organization, who are constantly challenging me on my thinking, I think it's helped me bring that same level of challenge to my organization that I'm a part of, so that that work is also prevalent there as well.
Thanks. Sophia?
Yeah, I mean, Inella said a lot of what I was thinking, but namely, Impact has given me the chance to be able to work collaboratively with a lot of different women. And I kind of touched on this earlier, but you get to come in contact with a lot of different people who have multiple different experiences and backgrounds. And there's beauty in that, because it's a learning experience. You're learning people, you're learning everybody has internal motivators. You're learning what people are passionate about, what people care about. But it's allowed me to meet people in that way. And it's also allowed me to gain skills in the grant process. And so, during my day job, I work in fund development. And so I'm usually the one researching prospects like Impact and doing grant writing. And so being on the other completely opposite end to be able to go in and view a lot of these grants, it kind of takes you out of the box a little bit, because as a grant writer, your goal is kind of focused on one thing, and that's for funding for your organization, telling about what you do in a way that appeals to whoever the funder is. But being on the opposite end, you have, again, so many organizations who do so many different works in different areas, and being able to kind of just read them all. And I don't know, that's been a learning perspective, because it's been able to broaden my experience to be able to kind of have that dual skill set, if you will.
Nia?
Yeah, similar to what both Sophia and Inella said, just kind of broadening my perspective and kind of making me have to place myself in different shoes in different points. So again, kind of like what Sophia says, I work in development also, and you're used to, writing the grants or seeing it from your organization's perspective. But since being with Impact, it's really made me have to sit more in the like funder perspective seat and being like, okay, well, what am I really like looking for? Challenging myself to think about what's really most important. Is it really, I mean, obviously budget and things like that are important, but what's the mission? Like, who are they affecting? Kind of being able to step outside of myself and also be willing to listen. Like, generally always do listen to other people's perspectives, but really having to sit with it at times and think about, okay, well, am I just saying no to something because I feel so strongly about it because it connects to me with my work, or is it something else overall? So like kind of just challenging perspectives, whether I'm at work writing a grant or if I'm sitting with other women in the room deciding what organizations we're going to move forward.
Super important. Thank you. How do you all see yourself furthering your own leadership within Impact 100 Philadelphia? I know many of you are already doing a lot in terms of taking on leadership roles. So how do you see yourself furthering your leadership? Nia, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So like you mentioned, currently I am serving as co-chair and for Founders Fellows and also FAC chair. I'm hoping that as I continue on, my leadership will move towards kind of really focusing on providing a greater experience or creating initiatives that really focus on memberships experiences, especially like for Founders Fellows or newer members, just creating spaces, programming, events, anything like that, that really helps them become more educated on impact, what our mission is, what we're trying to do, and just make them feel comfortable as members of Impact, whatever entry point that they came into Impact at.
Sophia?
I actually would love to be a FAC committee leader next year. I would say that so many women inspired me, but to name a few, Nia, you inspire me, and Inella, you inspire me. And in terms of being an FAC leader, like it's that energy that I would love to kind of continue and bring forward for the future Founder Fellows to be able to be a voice and be able to continue centering folks from different backgrounds and again, challenging a lot. We brought this up a lot today, but challenging a lot of the biases that we have, because we all have biases. I think that's something that's kind of innate in all of us, but to be able to challenge them and center people's voices that aren't traditionally centered. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to continuing to connect with different Founders Fellows and different women in a group.
Inella, do you have anything to add to that?
I think just based off like the direction that I think Impact is trying to move towards as far as it relates to DEI work, like I definitely think that I can see myself deepening like my involvement there, just because that work is really, I think, just central to like if you wanna help in like the best of ways, you got to do the work right. So I can't, the whole idea of like, so what, now what? Like if you're going to point out something that's wrong or that we can do better, like you have to be a part of making it better. So I'm looking to further that work, and I want to be careful about what I say on here because it's recorded. I don't want anybody holding me accountable to anything after this, but definitely being a team leader has been really rewarding. Just having to like listen twice as much as you speak. I definitely think that it's made me just more thoughtful overall. So I definitely think I'm going to continue being a team leader next year. And then just seeing where things go. But I definitely enjoy just connecting with the women at Impact. I just think the people who are a mentor to me, and I hope that I can be a mentor to others.
Thank you. How do you envision the Founders Fellowship program evolving over the next 5 years? Nia?
So I'm hoping, I know that we're growing again this year. I don't know if I can say the number, but I hope that in 5 years, we would be, this year we're at 15. So hopefully we could be at like 25, 30. That might be a lofty goal, but you never know. So having slots that we could fill for 25 to 30 women to come into the fellowship. And with that, like just continuing to keep the diversity in the Founders Fellows, and that eventually kind of being reflected in the overall Impact group. I think we're a very diverse group when it comes to race, ethnicity, cultural background, socioeconomic background, just thought processes, everything. And I think that's probably what Impact hopes will also be a reflection of the overall membership. And kind of in that mentioning the wording of overall membership, just hoping that people also see the Founders Fellows as any other member. We have different entry points for Impact. There's the fellowship, There's YPs and then there's like general members, we kind of use the term, but really we're all just members of Impact. All of us women came in with similar reasons. We wanted to have a positive impact in Philadelphia, you know, get more involved in nonprofit community or philanthropic community, wanting to network or connect with other amazing women. And so with all of that, we're all here for the same reason. So sometimes I think it can get a little muddied and maybe people think we're a little different from the other members, but we're really not. And we just want to be kind of seen as on one accord, and just kind of the overall thought that Impact has, that there's one woman, one voice, one vote. We're all here. And because of our own unique experiences and what we bring and just being who we are, that's enough value enough in itself. So just kind of wanting that to be kind of the overall thought process and what we're thinking about with Impact overall, but even in your daily life, that just keeping that thought process there.
Thank you, Nia. Sophia?
Nia said a lot of kind of what's at the top of my mind, but yeah, just to piggyback off of what was said, I think I see the Founders Fellows growing, and it's my hope that it continues to grow and continues to be more diverse in terms of all different viewpoints, age, race, religion, gender, etc. And because I think, again, there's such value in such having a diverse group of people from different backgrounds. There's a value in the different perspectives. And in terms of it growing, yeah, I hope that it grows. I hope that the Founders Fellows grows, because philanthropy is so important. And so to be able to kind of get the word out there about the Founders Fellows program and about Impact and Impact's reputation is, I just think of it as the bigger the impact that we can make as a whole, as a collective group of women who are all giving. And so, again, it's a great networking experience. And I think there's a lot of value for young women to be able to join and learn about philanthropy and network. And lastly, what's at the top of my mind is more so Impact as a whole, in terms of just attracting like the diverse group of people. I see Impact kind of moving towards just being a leader of change, because we give very large grants, and Impact is known for giving these large core grants. But being a leader of change, namely right now with trust-based philanthropy, and what we've learned is that there are so many organizations that are doing a lot of work, even in linear to other organizations who are doing similar work, but don't necessarily always meet the criteria. And Impact has learned that, and so to be a model giving group, to say, we're learning, we're constantly learning, and we're constantly looking at data, and we constantly want to improve and be better and make a bigger impact. That's been amazing. So I can only see that growing and getting better.
Thank you, Sophia. Inella, any comments you'd like to add to this question? Future Founders Fellows?
No, I think Nia and Sophia pretty much covered it, but I think eventually, I don't know if this will happen in 5 years, but getting to a point where Impact100 Philadelphia no longer needs to have a specific program for Founders Fellows, right? Like, we're diverse enough on our own from just our membership perspective that like we're going to get the people who can contribute, you know, in a diverse way, and that we don't have to intentionally like seek them out. So that's my hope.
Thank you. I think one common theme that I've heard there is sort of Founders Fellows sometimes being seen as separate and different, and the need, the continued need to really bring in a diverse array of voices into the overarching Impact100. Thank you all so much for your open and thoughtful discussion. Does anyone have any last remarks that they'd like to share? All right. Well, once again, a big thank you to Inella, Nia, and Sophia for this lovely discussion. We so appreciate your taking the time to share your wisdom and experiences with all of us. We also want to thank Joanne Levy and Nia Daye for co-chairing the Founders Fellows Committee and all of the work that they've been doing with that. And a big thank you as well to Ellan for her continued involvement in the Founders Fellow program and her interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion overall. So a little bit more about Impact and the Founders Fellows. As Ellan mentioned at the start of the program, we hope to have 20 Founders Fellows for the 2022 grant year, and we'll be recruiting at least 9 new fellows this year. The application will go live on the Impact website in mid-June, and the application deadline will be July 30th, 2021. It's actually coming up not too far away. Mary has dropped the link in the chat. Interviews will take place in late August, early September, and acceptances will be made before the membership kickoff in September. Help us spread the word. If you'd like to help us spread the word to young women you think might be interested, here are the characteristics we are looking for in Founders Fellows. The applicant must be between 25 to 35 years old, live in Bucks, Delaware, Philadelphia, Montgomery, or Chester counties, bring diversity of thought and perspective to Impact 100, bring helpful skills and/or experiences to Impact 100, be or have been involved with philanthropy and/or the nonprofit community through her work, studies, or activities, or want to be or have been a recipient of philanthropy. Lastly, be committed to Philadelphia and its surrounding counties for the foreseeable future. Finally, you can make donations to the Founders Fellowship on the Impact 100 website to help sponsor membership for outstanding younger women who bring diverse perspectives to our organization and grant making. You can reach out to Joanne Levy and Nia Daye, who are the Founders Fellows co-chairs, as I mentioned already, if you are interested in learning more about the Founders Fellows program, and please help us spread the word. Again, Mary has dropped really important links into the chat. And lastly, a word about Impact 100 membership. Tonight, we really focused on the Founders Fellows and the experiences and the value that the Founders Fellows bring to Impact 100. Reviewing your membership and recruiting new members is the perfect way to help our community. The more members we have, the more funding Impact 100 can provide for the organization doing critical work in the greater Philadelphia region. I myself, having been a part of Impact 100 for only a few years, have seen the grants grow so much exponentially each year. I would like to extend a big thank you to those 2021 members who have already rejoined for 2022. Yes, some members have already renewed. If you're listening and are not yet a member of Impact 100, we would love to have you and other women you know team with us in collective giving. Joining now will give us a head start on the 2022 grant pool. Keep in mind that if you choose to pay with monthly installments, you can start now. It's easy. Just go to the link on our website, which is being posted in the chat now, and find out how to join and how to set up your payments if you wish. Referrals are the #1 source of new members, so please encourage your friends, family, and neighbors to join. And remember that the deadline has been changed from December 1st to November 15th. Again, the deadline is November 15th. If you renew early, our membership committee could make fewer reminder calls this fall, which would make them very happy. Thank you so much. Before we go, I want to remind members of the calendar for selecting the grantees. We are at the end of our grants making process. Information packets, which this year will include short videos pertinent to the finalists, will be sent to all members on May 25th. As it was in 2020, voting this year will be electronic. The voting deadline will be June 3rd. The amounts of the grants awarded to each finalist will be announced on June 4th, 2021. All of the dates here are listed. We will celebrate our members and grantees at the virtual annual meeting on June 7th at 7 p.m. The annual meeting is open to members and non-members. Thank you so much for participating tonight. Please turn on your video if you haven't already so that we can see all your faces. Before you click on the Leave Meeting button on your screen, we are going to unmute everyone for a round of applause for our speakers. So, faces on and muting off, and a big round of applause for everyone tonight.
Great job.